In the late 19th century, Galician Ukraine began to experience a cultural revolution. This cultural revolution manifested itself in lots of ways: poetry, speech, education, but a major way that this cultural revolution saw its light was for the establishment of Ukraine's very first political parties. In today's Ukrainian Snapshot, we'll be talking about the very first Ukrainian political parties, which were established between 1890 and 1899. In 1848, Austrian authorities founded the first Ukrainian advocacy organization, which was called the Ukrainian National Council. Now, the reason I call it an advocacy organization and not a political party is because the Ukrainian National Council didn't really hold any strict political positions. You see, up until 1848, Ukrainians in Galicia were oppressed by the Poles and the Austrians, and Ukrainian national thought hadn't really developed. The National Council stuck around for a few years, advocating for educational rights, and then sort of just fizzled out. Ukrainians needed to develop a concrete national identity and thought before starting their first political parties. The development of Ukrainian national thought would really get kicked off in 1873, when the Shevchenko Society was founded in the capital city of Lviv. Now, the Shevchenko Society also didn't hold strict political positions, but they were a group of historians who researched deeply into the cultural history of Ukraine. This research spawned interest among many Galician Ukrainians, who now began to identify themselves as autonomous Ukrainians, separate of Austrians and Russians. One of the Ukrainians who was influenced by the teachings of the Shevchenko Society was Mikhailo Drachamanov, a minor Ukrainian nobleman who held some pretty radical political viewpoints. He took the historical research of the Shevchenko Society and merged it with his radical viewpoints of anarchical federalism. Now, Drachamanov was exiled from Austria due to his radical political viewpoints, but prior to his exile, he amassed quite a following of students, especially in the city of Lviv, who agreed with his viewpoint of anarchical federalism applying to Ukrainian national identity. In 1890, Drachamanov, along with the poet Ivan Franko and publicist Mikhailo Pavlik, founded the very first Ukrainian political party, which they called the Ruthenian Ukrainian Radical Party. Congratulations, everybody, we have our very first political party. The political party was founded on Drakhamanov's ideas of anarchical federalism, which isn't as contradictory as it might first seem. Anarchical federalism essentially argues that freedom is best maintained by a lack of an organized ruling class, and that the people, with their newfound freedoms, will work together to maintain their cultural federation. Now, this thought of an anarchy and the lack of a ruling class also meant that the Radical Party didn't advocate for Ukraine to be an independent state, and instead wanted it to be a semi-autonomous region of Austria, similarly to how Hungary was governed by the Austrian crown. Despite being its primary founder, Drachamanov didn't stay in charge of a radical party for too long. Since Drachamanov was exiled and was living in Bulgaria at the time, he led the party only by sending letters to Pavlik and Franko. This elongated time that it took for leadership communications to get through, along with Drakhamanov's decreasing health, made it so that by 1891, the Radical Party was essentially under the leadership of Pavlik and Franko. Pavlik and Franko's supporters in the party became known as the Old Radicals, labeled as such because they were all in their 40s and 50s. The Old Radicals very much maintained Drakhamanov's original viewpoint of anarchical federalism, and in an increasingly unpopular stance, did not support Ukrainian independence and instead wanted Ukraine to be a semi-autonomous region of Austria or Russia. And opposition quickly grew to Franco and Pavlik's old radicals in the form of a new radical branch of the party. The new radicals were mostly comprised of young students from Lemberg University. Ulyan Baczynski, a popular student speaker, quickly found his way to become the leader of the new radicals. Ulyan Baczynski was a strong believer in socialist Marxism, and this belief heavily influenced the new radical branch of the party. Under Baczynski's leadership, the new radical branch of the party formed two operating central ideas. The first is that Ukraine must become an independent state from Austria and Russia. And the second is that this independent state must be run by a workers' collective in the style of a socialist Marxist government. Franco and Pavlik were in extreme opposition to the new radical branch of their party. They thought that their politics were dangerous and were afraid that the Austrian crown, hearing of advocacy for a Marxist government, would outright ban Ukrainian political parties. Now, the old radicals made some attempts to unify the party, including some half-hearted concessions on the matter of independence, but largely the new radicals were still unsatisfied with how the radical party's leadership still stuck to Drakhamanov's now somewhat outdated political viewpoints. Very soon, however, the new radical branch of the party would also begin to show some cracks of disunity, all due to the shifting opinions of Pavlik and Franco. You see, Pavlik maintained Drakhamanov's viewpoint of an anarcho federation being Ukraine's future, but Franco more and more gravitated to the new radicals' viewpoint of a free, independent Ukrainian state. Franco began reaching out to multiple members of a new radical party, and especially he reached out to Ukrainian nationalist Vyacheslav Budzinovsky. With Vyacheslav Budzinovsky, Franco founded a new faction within the radical party, the Parliamentary New Radicals. The Parliamentary New Radicals advocated for a free, independent Ukrainian state, but believed that it should be governed by a Western-style parliamentary democracy and not by Marxist collectives. So let's recap. We now have three main factions within the Ruthenian Ukrainian Radical Party. We have the anarchist Old Radicals, led by Pavlik. We have the Parliamentary New Radicals, led by Franco and Budzinovsky, and we have the Marxist New Radicals, led by Baczynski. And remember, all this while, we also have Drakhamanov, sickly and all the way exiled in Bulgaria, who's trying to keep his party together by sending letters and letters of guidance calling for a unified political front. In 1895, Mikhail Drakhamanov died of cardiovascular conditions and was buried in Bulgaria. Along with him, the dream of a united radical party that would lead the Ukrainian people to freedom also died. You see, Drakhamanov's letters of guidance seem to have been the glue that kept the Ruthenian Ukrainian Radical Party from exploding. And with Drakhamanov's death, these letters ceased to exist. Factionalism rose to an all-time high, and in 1899, the Radical Party officially split into three separate parties. On the 18th of September 1899, the first official split in the party occurred. Ulyan Baczynski, along with the other members of a Marxist and New Radical branch of the party, split off and formed what they called the Social Democratic Ukrainian Party. This party advocated for an independent Ukrainian state that would be governed by Marxist workers' collectives. When Austria established official parliamentary elections in Galicia in 1907 and 1911, the Social Democratic Party turned out to be the least popular of the three Ukrainian political parties. On the 26th of December 1899, Ivan Franco and Vyacheslav Budzinovsky, along with the majority of the remaining members of the Radical Party, went on to form the Ukrainian National Democratic Party, which would focus on establishing an independent Ukrainian state with strong nationalistic values that would be governed by a parliamentary Western-style democracy. The National Democratic Party was also the most popular of the three Ukrainian political parties, going on to win the majority of votes in both the 1907 and 1911 elections. The Ukrainian National Democratic Party would go on to be incredibly influential. It helped found the West Ukraine National Republic in 1918 and remained quite prominent in the politics of that republic until it was overtaken by Poland. The remaining members of the Radical Party continued their political efforts to put forward an anarchist federalist state of Ukraine, although they too began advocating for a free and independent Ukrainian state. They were relatively popular and got second place in the elections of 1907 and 1911, and in 1918 they helped the National Democrats found the West Ukraine National Republic. The early days of Ukrainian political parties in Austria and Galicia was fast-paced, complicated, and in my opinion, utterly fascinating. It took the Ukrainians some 40 years to develop concrete national thought, but once they did, the Ukrainians and their political parties took off with incredible speed, bringing forth great conversation about independence and what the role of government should be. These political parties in Galicia also went on to found and influence multiple political parties in Russian-controlled Ukraine. But that's a topic for another video. This has been a Ukrainian Snapshot by Mark Raklenko. Thanks for watching.